Hello, happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. My apologies if that intro video didn't play its full breath there because our internet is a little bit slow because Mario and I are on the same internet. And so we live in the country and it's a little slow. So bear with us if there's any technical difficulties. But I have to give a shout out for the song that I'm using. It's from my favorite Portland, Oregon band. Their name is Blackwater Holy Light, and they allowed me to use that song for my intro, and I'm super excited, very grateful that they're allowing me to use it without having to, have any weird copyright issues going on. We recorded that little intro video. I'm really happy with how it came out. So episodes moving forward, you'll probably be able to see the whole thing. But without further ado, I want to just say how excited I am for today's episode because I have my man, Mario Garza, with us today. And I'm very stoked for this topic because it's something that's near and dear to his heart. And because he has brought up this symbolism to me, it's now becoming near and dear to my heart. And we've been able to together put some puzzle pieces together to what we may think may be one of the keys to understanding parts of the universe that are kind of hidden. So Mario is a fantastic graphic designer. He is a symbologist and he's an occultist who has been looking into this information for a decade plus now and has an amazing symbolic library that we'll talk about. He is just always diving into something. He's always blowing my mind. We have been just having a beautiful partnership, and it's just a wonderful thing that we've been able to create together. And now we want to share some of the things that we talk about on a regular basis with all of you. So without further ado, let's welcome Mario. Hello. How's it going, babe?
Good. It's nice to see you, even though I just saw you a couple minutes ago as we were
Yes.
preparing and running around, like chickens with their heads cut off because our internet connection is very slow right now. So you guys will have to just be patient with us, and let us know in the chat too if we're glitching out or if things are problematic in that regard. Because we put together a presentation, we would love for you guys to see it. We're having technical issues with StreamYard as well. I think it all has to do with our internet connection. As Michelle was saying, we live a little rurally, so we don't have 5G and we don't have cable broadband or anything like that. So we'll make do. But yes, it is nice to be here. How are you? Even though I know how you're doing, but for the people, how are you, babe?
No, I'm doing really good. And as we've talked about, we've just been both very pumped for to have this opportunity to present this information. So, I mean, I'm excited. I think that you're going to present a lot of really awesome nuggets for people to definitely think about, digest, and hopefully integrate into some of the things that they think about.
Yeah, well, I have you to thank because, I mean, honestly, in large part because you have brought the plant wisdom into our lives, and you are the one who is communing with them on a regular basis, way more than I am. And you are, tending to the garden way more than I am. And so you bring the plant life in my world in a number of ways. And so this is something that we talk about plant herbalism and plant medicine and all that kind of stuff all the time, just around these parts. And so there are things that I've been wanting to share with other people. And so now is the time to do it.
I agree. I agree. And I'm happy to provide the platform and happy to be the one that's brought plants into your life because you've brought so many other things into my life as well. And so together it's a beautiful fusion. And yeah,
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
let's just dive into it. And
Cool.
I want to actually, though, first for people who aren't familiar, can you just give us a little background about yourself? As I said in the beginning, you're a graphic designer and you've been doing that for almost 20 years now, or maybe even over 20 years. So if you wanted to just kind of give us a little bit of information about how you got started as a graphic designer and how graphic design has helped you to read between the lines when it comes to looking into all sorts of symbolic information.
Yeah, sure. So if I've been designing, like you were saying, for like 20 years. I started in high school. I'm in my late 30s now, and I went to a charter school system. And so for half of the day, my junior and senior year, I went to this school that was basically focused on media. And they had a bunch of other courses you can take, but I really wanted to focus on design. And so I took a couple of design classes at that charter school, and it was awesome because it allowed me to meet other people that were interested in design. And so people were, trading burn CDs with Photoshop on it and stuff like that. And so I got an exposure to a lot of things that I wouldn't have gotten exposed to otherwise, and I was able to talk to people about design. And so, just meeting kids who were interested in graphic design and graphic art and knew about, some sort of like art history, as it relates to like the design world and stuff like that. There's a few designers that were really popular at the time who were doing like street art and stuff like that. And so from there, just having a copy of Photoshop, at home, I just started tinkering around, and that led me to start doing design work for friends' bands. I was doing a lot of flyers and T-shirts, and then that kind of rolled over into doing, album covers and posters and stuff like that, mostly for a lot of like punk and hardcore and metal bands and all of that. So for the last 20 years, I've been refining my eye with design, and so there really is, it's just like with any profession, the longer you do it, the more you're going to notice a lot of like nuances and details and intricacies that the novice is not going to notice. And so over the years, just from doing so many projects for so many different people, I just started noticing symbols, and I started noticing just like different shapes, and there was just imagery that I would like gravitate towards and things like that. And so after a while, it would just make sense that I would get interested in symbolism just in general. But because I had my designer's background and my visual eye kind of trained, I really wanted to hone in on like very specific like glyphs and like things that I thought were kind of occulty or witchy or magical or whatever. A lot of people who are into artwork, they're kind of just attracted to that stuff anyway. And so I was definitely attracted to all of that. And once I came around to like truth or information or alternative information, then it just made sense that I would start wanting to decode, the signs and symbols around me. And then once I found out there was just like a whole library's worth of like occult symbolism to study and all of that, it was kind of game over. But I would say the tarot definitely helped me with my transition from being a designer towards being more of an occultist type person.
That very specifically with the tarot. I remember when you first even found the tarot, how you were introduced to it, and just watching you become so intrigued by it. And I saw you just totally seeing it from a different angle that I had never seen before and that I had never really heard anyone else talk about. And that is what I see with a lot of your work is that you end up going into these spaces and you start connecting dots and you start coming out with this stuff that I've never heard anyone speak of before. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about also tonight is your journey towards the northern sky, northern symbolism, polar symbolism, and then how that relates to the plant world. And so when was it that you first started getting into the northern symbolism? I know this, but there's people out there that might not know.
I was gonna say, you're asking all these questions you already know.
Yeah, we
No,
gotta fill in the people, gotta fill
I
in the
know, I
people.
know. No, the main thing for me, if I'm being really honest, you're really helping encourage me, by the way, right now, just to stop beating around the bush. And that's kind of symbolic of what's going on here with this presentation too, is that
Woohoo!
I feel like there's a lot of information that I held close to my chest for a lot of various reasons. Michelle knows very well that I have this tendency to be more inward, just kind of withdrawn and just kind of like keep to myself and everything else. And I feel like that's kind of affected even my content and the media that I put out and everything else. But there's a lot of things that I have yet to really explicitly talk about on my channel, that I've talked about a bunch of other places, that I feel like it's just time for me again to stop beating around the bush and really start talking about like my journey, my symbolic journey, and kind of where it's taken me as of late, which I feel like is really powerful, potent stuff. But in 2014, I first came across the flat Earth material that started being put online, and so one of the main guys was Eric Dubay. He started talking about it on his blog. I was following his blog before he was even talking about anything related to flat Earth or geocentrism or anything like that. But once he started making it known that that's where he's at, I started taking notice. And then within the last or a couple years after that, there was a window from like 2014 to like 18 or 19 or something. There was a lot of information about this online. So since 2014, I've been looking into geocentrism, the idea that things once again are inverted in this reality, and that not necessarily, what we're taught in school is that everything revolves around the sun, right? And under a geocentric model, it seems as though that's kind of flipped on its head. That actually, Earth is kind of center stage, and it is still and motionless, and the heavens are revolving around it. That makes way more sense to me personally. And so I started learning about the North Star and Northern symbolism around 2014, 15, 16, 17. And then since then, I've kind of kept tabs on it. But I would say it was over the last 3 or 4 years that I really start diving into it. And I started realizing that there's actually occult connections with the Northern Sky. And I actually think a lot of occult secrets have to do with the Northern Sky. And so it's really interesting that would even be the case. But from what I'm reading and what I'm putting together, that seems to be the deal, is that a lot of, people are interested in occult symbolism and stuff. A lot of it's actually geocentric. That's kind of one of the things that I've come to realize, is that a lot of geocentric symbolism, it's it is still used and understood in occult circles. Not all of them, but that is one of the things that they continue to talk about and revere and kind of honor in their own way. So I think a lot of modern symbolism was built upon an earlier foundation, which is more polar in nature versus solar in nature. So yeah, so basically, long story short, since 2014, that's kind of been more of my thing. And you are muted. Okay, you're good now. It could
Okay.
be me just not getting the refresh as quickly as I should be,
Yeah, I
basically.
think there's a little delay or something. So
Yeah.
we'll be cautious of that.
Yeah.
But yes. But the polar thing really helped just like solidify a lot of the things that you just talked about for me. Although I had already been convinced that we aren't living on a spinning ball and all these other things, but the polar thing for some reason really drove it home. And so when you started bringing all this stuff in, it just started making so much more sense to me, because I always think of the toroid when I think of the pole, and how we are living in a toroidal universe. We are toroids. Our heart is a toroid. We are creating this toroidal field constantly wherever we go. And that when you also look at nature, you're seeing mini toroids, or as you would say, mini poles everywhere. And that every single one of these items has an energy field, and it's there, it's real. And I think that that's where the Doctrine of Signatures comes in, because one of the things the Doctrine of Signatures does is that it totally shows us what something can be good for, what it means, all these things. And I think that symbolically, we're seeing these poles, and I think it's just part of a bigger universal truth, really.
Yeah. 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 No, exactly. I think polar symbolism really it's like what you were saying, it's a key to understanding a lot of aspects of this reality symbolically. And so I think that it came before solar symbolism and solar worship. So the whole thing basically is that what I'm realizing is that I'm not a heliocentrist. I'm not a heliocentrist, and so I'm a geocentrist. And so therefore, my symbolic language, how I see the world and perceive symbolism, is actually geocentric in nature. And so a lot of people I see are interested in geocentric material, but they're still thinking like heliocentrists. And so they're still attributing everything towards the sun. And I think that makes sense in a modern way of looking at things, but solar symbolism is more of a modern construct. And so what came before that was geocentrism, and therefore geocentric symbolism. And so as I've kind of committed myself to being more of a geocentrist, it makes more sense. It's the gift that keeps on giving, in my opinion. And so a lot of things have really fallen into place once I've really just taken that leap, I guess you can say, and just kind of acknowledge that this is really where my heart lies. And I've gotten way more out of studying things from a geocentric lens than from a heliocentric lens. I think the heliocentric model is really out of whack for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, here, here. And I guess before we get into the presentation, I know that you do have an extensive symbolic library. And I know that that's one of the things that kind of gives you a leg up when it comes to just figuring out some of this stuff, putting it together, because you have such a huge, you know, collection of books that you've been collecting over the years. And I know that with the Northern Symbolism, you have a handful of books that you've been very excited about that have really like cracked codes for you and opened your eyes in other ways. So maybe just tell people a little bit about your bookworm habits that I just love about you so much.
Yeah. So I remember coming across my first symbolic library book, first symbolic reference book rather, in 2006 or 7, and I was really intrigued. I bought it and I still have it. And so that was my first symbolic reference book. And I was like, wow, that's amazing that there's just books on symbolism. I didn't even know that that was a thing at the time. And so ever since then, I just always kept tabs, no matter what bookshop we go to or whatever I'm doing online. I always just keep tabs on like what books are out there that are symbolic dictionaries or reference books or whatever. And I kind of just fell into this niche over the years. And, over the years, I've just accumulated a bunch of them. And so it's really awesome because once you're starting to study a symbol, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter what it is. If you have a bunch of different books you can cross reference, it is so valuable. And there's just little gems that you'll learn from every single book generally. And then obviously, too, the older the book, I think the better in a lot of ways. So I feel like I've gotten like most of the main symbolic reference books that are out there. And like I said, I'm always keeping my eyes open for other ones. But yeah, I would say like probably 2000 and like 12 and through like 15 or whatever, I bought a bunch of these books and they've come in handy like so much. I can't believe it. So when I was doing all of my astrology stuff, we're in Sagittarius, so I would just look up the arrow, the symbolism of the arrow, or the symbolism of the centaur, or the symbolism of the bow. And you just look, in 20 different books about what they say regarding bow symbolism, and you'll get a really, really good idea of what you're dealing with. And I think that that has been a huge leg up for me, is just having this little library that I can reference and having this perspective that is more from like the symbolic path, I guess you can say. And so it's just allowed me to kind of like, absorb a lot of different little nuggets of wisdom that I don't think I would have probably come across anywhere else. So yes, that is absolutely one of the things that is just like near and dear to my heart. I used to have collections of all kinds growing up, and now I collect books. I think you're muted, baby. Unless it's just not updating on my end.
Said, but with that said, let's maybe just get into the presentation that you've prepared.
Okay. Yeah. So that's I mean, we're gonna really test the limits of our bandwidth right now.
We are. So hold on,
Because
folks.
yeah, honestly, please, you guys should just chime in and no sound, right? Exactly. So when you started talking this last time, you were unmuted the whole entire time.
Yes, I was.
See, yeah, on my end, you were muted and it showed muted, and then people are saying in the
Yeah,
chat.
they're saying sound. Okay. Thank you, y'all. Well,
Right.
yeah. So anyway, well, what I was saying was that we're just going to get into the presentation that is prepared for this talk, and hopefully it all works out. And let's just give it a try.
Okay. Yeah. Please give us feedback if our bandwidth is not up to speed. So I will add myself to the stream here. And can you see my screen, babe?
Yeah. No, I can't see your screen, but I'm adding. Now I just added your screen share. Now
Okay.
I see it. Okay.
Cool. All right. So obviously, this is the healing home.
And sorry about the screen share. For some reason, we weren't able to upload the actual presentation to StreamYard. So
Right. Yeah. And I think that just has to do with our internet connection. So we'll just make do as best as we can here. And as long as people can see these images and hear us, that would be awesome. But please let us know what's going on. So this is the world tree. And the world tree to me over the last handful of years has really just grown in significance and in prominence for me. I feel like it's one of those symbols that could really unlock a lot of things for people. There's a beauty with the world tree and a simplicity and an elegance that you're not going to see in a lot of other symbols. It's very holistic, and volumes could be written just about the tree in and of itself, and what the tree represents. And so this is just one version of the world tree. You guys might recognize it as Yggdrasil. If you see a more graphic representation of it that looks more like an icon or a stamp, it might look something like this. I'm going to be speaking about the world tree in general terms, basically. So the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, etc. Because there are multiple world tree traditions, tree of life traditions, that have their own different systems kind of attached to it. But for all intents and purposes, they all have the same general structure. Um, and as I was saying, there's world trees from all over the world, right? And so this is the date palm. And so in the Middle East, this was known as a world tree, tree of life plant. And so the palm tree, just in and of itself, that's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down. It's very, very fascinating. But the world tree, basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's many shapes and varieties to this world tree. And I thought this was a really interesting tree from Africa. This is under some groups over in Africa. This is their version of the world tree. Very, very phallic. And that is something that we will be getting into with this whole entire presentation. This idea of a central pole or a pillar or a post. But I love the way this tree looks. I think it's really, really interesting. I'd love to see one in person. So once again, world trees from all over the place.
I'm not seeing that on my end. Here it is finally. There's just a huge delay. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I just progressed to the next one.
Okay.
So let me know when you see that.
It's up now.
Yeah. So this is Buddha in front of another version of what could be called the world tree or tree of life. There's a lot of deities that are associated very strongly with trees. When it comes to the plant world, the plant kingdom, the tree might be the plant of plants, in a lot of ways. And so there's many magical traditions that associate trees within their lore and within their practices, and within just like how they honor the spirit realm. There's a very transcendental spiritual quality to the tree and to plants in general. But the tree definitely has its own history in that regard with all this stuff. And so even in the esoteric traditions, there's multiple tree symbols as well. So as an example, this is the Kabbalistic tree of life, right? And so I'm sure most of you guys have probably seen it. There's 3 pillars, including this central pillar. And that is the main thing I wanted to highlight, is that there is this central stem or central trunk that is the basis, that is the foundation, that's the core of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And this, shape, this line, this phallic symbol, um, it's something that I've really studied a lot over the last handful of years. Um, but what it means in terms of like plant life and the tree is it's a bridge from the heavens to earth. And so I have a quote about that. And so this is from Dictionary of Symbols. And so he says, Jean or Jean Chevalier says, because its roots delve into the soil and its branches stretch up to the skies, the tree is universally regarded as a symbol of the relationships established between heaven and earth. In this sense, trees possess the character of centers to the degree that the world tree is synonymous with the world axis. And that pretty much says it all right there, in my opinion. Exactly right. The tree is synonymous with the world axis. So this is the idea that there is this central pillar or post or pole. It's been called a column. It's an obelisk. It's a lot of different things. But that there is this symbolic pole that goes from the northern sky downward to earth, and that this is a bridge. This is a bridge between the heavens and earth, and trees represent that bridge just in and of themselves with how they're shaped, how they shoot up towards the sky. And this central post or pole, you see it all over the plant kingdom. It's really wild. I mean, I know that this is my jam. This is the symbolism that I'm very much interested in. But over the last year, when we go on hikes or walks or whatever, and I'm just like looking around at all of the plant life, I can't not see this central post or pole in so many different plants. And even this one, this mushroom, it just reminds me of this central pole or post, the world axis. And it kind of reminds me of a firmament above. You look at a simple flower and you notice that it's just there's
Looks like
generally a
stones.
stem. Go ahead, Bob.
Delayed, but we're on the next slide already. So, but the Amanita has the white speckles on the top, which look like stars. So it even further kind of demonstrates and illustrates the firmament, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really fascinating that it looks like that.
Hmm.
Um, moving on. So this is just the flower. Maybe if you just want to keep yourself unmuted, so then there's not that delay, and then whenever you want to chime in, you can chime in. Just thinking out loud. But with this flower, you obviously see the stem and it's going up towards the heavens, and you have this beautiful flower up top. And once again, I just can't not see polar symbolism when I look at many of the plants that we have around us. And maybe if you want to read this one and the next slide, that could work out.
Yeah. So, can you hear me?
I
Or
can,
am I?
yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So, yes. So, as we've been bringing up before, the Doctrine of Signatures, this is something that's talked about by many people. Many people in this community, too, are learning about this, have been talking about it. And I'm so excited that people are, because when I learned about this a handful of years ago, it just totally helped me connect so many dots. And so this is a quote from one of my favorite herbalists of all time. His name is Matthew Wood, and this is from his book, The Book of Herbal Wisdom Using Plants as Medicine. On the Doctrine of Signatures, signatures represent configurations of energy or patterns in plants, and these correspond to similar patterns in people. And so the whole concept of this is that when you're looking at a plant, the plant has certain signatures that will guide you and tell you what organ systems it may be good for, what kind of conditions it may be good for, what organs, I think I said organ systems, but what fluids of the body, because we're going like it goes deep, because it goes from like form of the plant, the color of the plant, the aroma of the plant, there's a spiritual aspect to this as well. And so there's all different types of categories of this. And I've found in my own study, just sitting with plants and observing them, that the doctrine of signatures is one of those things that it's a very intuitive sort of thing. So it's intuitive, but it also is kind of almost right in your face when you really look at it. And it also kind of correlates with the plants and their like planetary rulerships and things like that. A lot of this stuff really comes together. And yeah, I think there's another quote in here by Matthew Wood too.
Yep.
Because he does such a great job of kind of like simply putting it. And so the doctrine of signatures, again, this is the idea that the plant resembles the disease, organ, or person for which it's remedial. And it also kind of goes into like the place where the plant grows. So if it grows in like maybe a wet, swampy area, it's probably going to have attributes that could help a damp, cold, tissue state or ailment. So there's all types of huge, vast things symbolically that you can look into with this. And kind of going into what we're talking about with this, just seeing all these poles around. Again, I think I said it already, but it's just showing us kind of like this is a secret of the universe. Just looking at a plant is kind of giving you a tip. It's a secret of the universe. We are all poles. The plants are poles. We are almost like, as James said in my last interview, we're all plants. Even, you can even take it as far as that and say like we're all plants. And so that's another reason why the doctrine of signatures just totally checks out with me and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and like what you were saying earlier, everything seems to be toroidal in nature, which we'll be getting into. And so I'm starting to see the polar symbolism with p-pole. Notice that p-pole, there's pole right there at the end of that word. And so our spine is symbolic of this pole. When you stand upright, you look very similar to a pole or some phallic object. And so it makes sense to me when I see just the plants we have around our property and in the woods and stuff like that. I'm just seeing all of these different plants. And obviously, I just want to say too, not every single plant is just like this upright stem and then there's something at the top or whatever. Obviously, I'm well aware that, there's viney plants and bushy plants and very leafy plants and everything. But if you just notice that there's a lot of things that these plants have in common, though, this root system, some sort of stem, right? And then this upper structure, many times reaching up towards the heavens. The woods or the forest, it just would not be the same without this same general framework, right? And so I think that people, we are very much symbolic and we are of this world tree sort of idea. We're actually not separate from it at all. And so I think that there's a lot of overlapping symbolism between the world tree and man and how man is designed and everything else. So when I see the plants out there, I'm kind of just realizing that we have more in common than what you would normally think, unless you decide to get into this kind of material or whatever. But yeah, let's advance to the next slide.
Okay.
Right. So here's some mullein from our garden.
Yes.
So hopefully it's updated for you.
Yep, I can see it.
Cool. So just real quick, just notice once again this shoot, this stem just going upward towards the heavens. Notice how phallic the top of the mullein is, right? And so to me, it's just the same expression that I'm talking about in this presentation, this polar expression. And then I know you had some things to say about mullein, right?
Yeah, totally. And kind of just like to demonstrate the doctrine of signatures with this plant a little bit more. So mullein, for people who don't know, mullein has very long, kind of wide leaves that resemble a lung. So, and a lot of people know mullein as a lung remedy, which it is. And it also, the leaves are very fuzzy and they can be soft. They're soft to the touch, but the hairs on the mullein are actually kind of irritating to the skin. And I've had this happen to me where I'm making like a smoke blend or something, and you're just like using your hands to blend all the mullein up with whatever else you have in there, and all of a sudden, like, you kind of start to get like a little bit of a rash, and it's the irritation that's coming from those little hairs. But one of the doctrines of signatures is the irritation that's happening on the outside of your skin is symbolic of the irritation that it can actually help inside your body, specifically in
Mm.
the lungs, because those little hairs on the leaves are representative of the hairs that are inside of our lungs. And sometimes those little hairs can get damaged or just worn down if you're having some sort of like deep lung ailment going on, lots of coughing, maybe you have a dry cough or something like that, and it's kind of just really irritating the lungs. The mullein is really great for that. And another thing to look at with the mullein, the one we're looking at now is actually a second year mullein. So the first year, the leaves will be very close to the ground, and that's actually the best time to harvest mullein leaf is in the first year. And then in the second year, that plant will shoot up like this, and then it will produce the yellow flowers that come on the top, which are really great ear remedies. And if you ever pluck a mullein flower and you kind of look through it, it looks like an ear canal. And that's one of the things that I realized about it a few years ago. And it just like kind of really set some other things on fire for me. And the yellow flower, yellow is usually symbolic of being a like a liver or a kidney or urinary remedy, or it works with the bile maybe. And mullein actually can be used for the kidneys. It's good for inflammation and bringing it down. It's also really great as a spine remedy, I find, and it can actually help to set bones.
Okay. I think I'm by myself right now. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing. So Michelle got kicked off, but I'm sure she will be back
I'm back.
shortly.
Right
Oh,
in
she
the
is back right
middle,
now.
right in the middle of mullein. But what I was right in the middle of saying is that it's ruled by Saturn. So that's where the bone setting qualities will come from. And when you're looking at that second year mullein and it is just like shooting up straight to the sky, I always look at that as like a spine. And so, even on an energetic level, mullein can be used for supporting you when you're not feeling confident. You know, if you're trying to stand straight, work on your posture, things like that. Mullein can be really great as an energetic spiritual remedy on that level. So, man,
Nice.
sorry that our internet is being so wonky. That's too bad.
Oh
But
yeah. We're just gonna roll with it. And so maybe we'll have to turn this into a video presentation that we upload or something.
I think so. Yeah.
That's awesome, babe. So the thing about the world tree, as I read earlier, if the world tree is symbolic of the bridge from heaven to earth and is symbolic of the world axis, which by the way, the whole thing, I haven't said this yet, but we have slides later on that's going to clarify. I'll probably repeat it a few times because it's so important. But the world axis goes from the northern part of our domain towards the northern sky, which basically at the end of that is Polaris, the pole star, and the heavens revolve around this central pole, around this axis. So it's like an axle to a wheel. It's a great wheel in the heavens. It's a chariot wheel or it's a mill. There's been a million different metaphors for it. But if the world tree or the tree itself is symbolic of this world axis, what does that say about a plant like mullein? What does that say about some of these other plants that we're going to explore? That just shoot up towards the heavens, towards the sky with this central stem. I think what we're talking about, in my opinion, it seems like the world tree metaphor can be extended to other plants. And so,
We lost Mario. Wow, this is such a bummer on the internet front here. Um, yeah, so well, you know, I feel like I hope that we are going to be able to continue this because we may have to do something else. But okay, so well, to just talk about the doctrine of signatures a little bit more, and one of the things that Mario continues to talk about is the stem. So looking at the stem. And so I always think of the stem as like it's like the lifeline. You know, all the parts of the plant are very important, obviously. But the stem is what transports the water and the nutrients and everything else upward to the plant. And there's a whole system, just like our system, just like we have a system. We have veins, we have a heart, we have a lymphatic system. It all works together. It all has its totally own thing. And, you know, people in the chat, babe, are kind of suggesting, why don't we just get on the same computer? Because it might work better.
The same computer.
Computer.
Yeah. Should I go over there or do you want to come over here?
Whichever. It doesn't. What do you think? You have a little more space in your
I do.
room. So I can just come over. Let's just do that because I don't want it to keep, not
Okay.
gonna
Yeah,
stop.
sounds good.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay,
Awesome.
keep them flowing.
I will. See you in a couple. Nice. Okay. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I think we'll probably refine this presentation in some way, shape, or form so that we can get it out there in a nice, clean sort of way. Right before we got on air, I saw that StreamYard was giving us issues anyway. And then I was like, okay, well, this is not ideal, but it's cool. We'll roll with it. Let me share my screen again and we will proceed. Right. So this central stem, I think, is something that is worth acknowledging. I think it's very important. Once again, I am coming to a lot of these conclusions because I am a geocentrist. And so I think geocentrism symbolically was a thing before heliocentrism. So a lot of symbols that we associate with being solar symbols were once geocentric symbols. They were Earth-based symbols, and geocentrism, just as a system, is way more holistic. I'm coming to a lot of these conclusions because I have shed my heliocentric programming. And it's also just my opinion. We're keeping it very casual today, just kind of getting a lot of things off my chest and just hanging out and stuff. But I do think heliocentrism is some sort of program. And I think that it's an agenda. And I think that, once again, there are groups who are aware of the truth, but I think that they would be foolish to basically give us some of these truths outright. And so they're going to let us believe in a heliocentric reality, a solar based reality. And I think that that's going to affect your framework for everything, moving forward. So if you're a heliocentrist, you are going to see solar symbolism at the heart of everything. If you're a geocentrist, you're going to see earth based symbolism at the heart of everything. So did you want to say something about this slide here? Or are you good?
Should I have headphones or?
I don't know. I mean, we're kind of just doing this on the fly.
All right. Well, on the fly. Yeah. So this is mugwort here. And this is the mugwort from our garden, which totally exploded this year. And it was super tall. I would say it kind of probably got like at least 10 feet tall. And so this just really demonstrates that upward growth that we were talking about. And this is two different types of mugwort here. It's a coastal mugwort, and it is also the Artemisia vulgaris variety.
Nice. And maybe I can find a splitter for us here in a moment, whenever it's convenient. So here's just another example of yet another plant that is shooting up towards the heavens, creating this bridge between Earth and what's happening in the sky. And this very much reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk. And so we actually we watched the Jack and the Beanstalk video the other day, just breaking down the story essentially. But I really love the metaphor of Jack and the Beanstalk in that it's showing you this literal bridge from Earth to the heavens. And so I think every plant is symbolic essentially of the same thing if it's shooting upward like that. And so this has been a tradition, I think, that has been baked into world tree symbolism and tree symbolism for a very, very long time. I'm just extending it out to other plants that maybe look similar. And so we have a lot of woods around us, and I'm just always kind of taken aback, depending on where we're at just the vertical lines around me when I see certain parts of the forest. It looks not quite like this. This is just an online photo that I found, but very, very similar. And we've had moments where we've been in the woods and there's just so many trees just vertically just shooting up that it's very, very striking. It's actually kind of confusing too, depending on where you're at and just kind of like, what you're doing and whatnot. But the thing is that these trees, they all follow the same basic shape, right? And this shows you a highlighted version of one of those trees. And it is of the pole, it's the phallus, it's the axis mundi, it's the world column, world pillar, etc. And so to me, it's just no mistake, I guess, from a grand sort of design level that we have this central pillar, this central axis, and then trees, oftentimes, depending on the variety, can look like this. Once again, just kind of like bringing it all back to this bridge between realms. The roots going to the underworld, and then obviously the branches and leaves going to the heavens. And the root thing is important, so that's something that I just wanted to emphasize that, there's this as above, so below correspondence with the plant world, and especially the world tree. So obviously, the higher a tree grows, it stands to reason that its roots would go, there's a correlation with how deep the roots are going to go and how tall the tree is going to be. And so we can't forget about the roots. We wouldn't want to do that now.
No.
And this reminds me of the placenta, and so the world tree, there's a correspondence with the placenta. You could see the central stem or trunk here, and then you could see how it fans out, and you see the root system or the branch system, depending on how you look at it. And there's been many people before me talking about the placenta and how it relates to the world tree that way.
And I just have to say, the placenta, having actually held a placenta, I've held a couple placentas before after helping a friend of mine with a couple of her births. And there is an indescribable energy that comes from a placenta. And I think that this, just looking at it, I can remember the feeling that I had of it. Like, there is this vibration that comes from it. And it just really like encapsulates this concept so well. And I really love just the connections that are made with it, because this is life. We are looking at life. And so to me, then, when we look at a tree, we're looking at life. And when we're looking at a plant, we're looking at life. And when we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at a life. So as we end up kind of coming to conclusions in the world, it's like it's all connected. We're all connected. All this stuff is connected, and it's just like a marvelous thing that's going on. So I just love this connection with the placenta. And shout out to Gabe, shout out to Chance, shout out to all the people that have been talking about the placenta for so long, and making these connections that it's all about the placenta, and it all comes back to the placenta. And this kind of just illustrates how important the sacred center stuff is, and how much it is really, it's very valuable. And I think it really is just a key to understanding the universe so much better. And I think we have a splitter here.
We have a splitter. So we're going to see if it works. I haven't used it in years. Wish me luck.
And thank you guys for hanging in with this technical difficulties too. It's just, sometimes you just got to go with the flow and let things happen. So here we are.
Mic check. No.
Okay, I can hear myself.
Hello. Oh, sweet.
Okay, cool.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm glad that works.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. Okay, so moving on. Is it long enough for you?
No, but just keep going.
Cool. Maybe
This is better.
sweet. So once again, I just wanted to show the roots, the root system of a tree and what that looks like, and highlight the significance of the roots and just the whole system of a tree in general. I feel like it's worth acknowledging all aspects of the tree, and the roots obviously have a very vital part to play in everything. And it's really interesting too. I know I already brought up the Kabbalistic tree of life, but one of the things Ben Balderson has told me, and he's mentioned it before on other streams and whatever, but it really clicked, I think, the last time I heard him talk about it. And he was saying that they cut off the root system. And so there are no roots in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And so therefore it's not grounded. So even just think about what the root represents symbolically. To have no root system means to have no foundation. And I think it would make a lot of sense that a system would be introduced that does not have a strong foundation for nefarious purposes and whatnot. So shout out to Ben Balderson for that nugget of wisdom. And obviously the roots too. There's root medicine, and so there's a lot of things going on there. Obviously, it being underground, there is this underworld component with the roots and all of that too. So there's a million things we can talk about with the roots. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Bob?
I mean, I think just with the roots, James and I talked about this last week, but the roots being such valuable medicine for getting down to very stubborn illnesses or emotional states, anything that's really deeply seated, is gonna be roots are gonna be really valuable and helpful for any kind of condition like that. And roots, there's just something there that's very, it's dark, it's heavy, but it's healing, it's deeply healing at the same time. And a lot of times dark and heavy stuff is very healing. It's just how it goes.
And obviously too, if the root system isn't doing well, then the whole entire system doesn't do well. And so that just kind of goes without saying. I think it's like that probably with all of the main aspects of any plant, but the roots obviously need to do their thing in order for the whole system to thrive. But the main thing, that I'm excited to talk about today is this idea that a lot of flowers, a lot of plants, they have this central stem, they shoot upward, and then there's this amazing expression at the very top of the stem, which, in many plants, it looks like a flower. Here, it looks like a bunch of mini flowers, so notice the fractalized sort of nature of this, right? You have this one stem, and then it expresses out into dozens of other smaller stems, and then those stems have the exact same framework going on as well, the same design, that at the end of those stems, then there's this other expression, and then there's little flowers at the tip of those stems, right? And so to me, once again, it's just like when I look at this polar symbolism, this world axis symbolism, I see it expressed all over the place. And so to me, this photo at least is a really good example of that main expression from that stem and then onward and onward, basically. And so we're going to go through a few images where we look at kind of flowers and what floral images, what they bring to mind and what they conjure up symbolically. Um, Once again, you have that central stem, you got this bulby portion up top, and then you've got the little components that obviously can be blown away, the seeds. And those seeds obviously are little stems as well. But this basically this bulb up top, this expression to me, it reminds me a lot of the pole star. It reminds me of the axis mundi shooting up towards the heavens. Then you have this pole star, the center of this wheel, the center of the churning of heaven. And it just makes me wonder if there is something going on with the symbolism of a lot of plants and flowers and Polaris. Here you can see that these flowers, shout out to Chance. I don't know where he got it from, but he said that flowers are flowers. And I think that makes a lot of sense. When you look at the shape of a flower, to me, it's both receptive and projective. It's almost projective like rays, right? Like the rays of the sun. But it's also very receptive. And so it's going to receive, the nutrients from the sun. It's going to receive, insect life and things like that. And even it's very receptive too, because it catches our attention. So when you're walking through a garden or you're just on a hike or whatever, and you see a flower, it grabs your attention. And so there's a receptive quality with that as well. Did you want to say anything?
The thing that comes to my mind is just, flower essence medicine. So, talking about being receptive, when I think about making flower essences and using flower essences, you're kind of like receiving a more gentle message and a gentle healing from the flower itself, because it's working more on an emotional level and a spiritual level. And you're just taking the flower and you're floating it into distilled water, and you're allowing the sun to then put its energy into the water and mingle with the flower, and you're creating this beautiful essence that can be taken in drop doses. And then you're actually, splitting it down like you would a homeopathic remedy. So you're getting such a small amount, but the potency of these type of elixirs are just like bar none. It's been amazing. I've seen amazing results with flower essences on myself and other people. And so it kind of just goes along with the receptivity of that whole thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I'll say too with this relationship to the pole star is that the northern sky, deep, um, there's deep symbolism related to a god at the northern sky, but I'm uncovering a lot of information about the goddess that exists at the northern sky. And so there is this kind of like early, um, maybe primordial, chaotic goddess. Sometimes she has been compared to a mother bear. So think Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, that there is a goddess at the northern sky. And she is part of a lot of different traditions that I'm kind of just like coming across right now and realizing like the potency and the power of what all of that represents. She's been compared to a boat. I'm reading a book right now called The Celestial Ship of the North. It's an amazing book. I'm learning a lot about this tradition right now. It's hooked up with the Typhonian tradition if people are interested in some of that material. And so there's this goddess symbolism at the northern sky. The Virgin Mary has been compared to the North Star. There's like symbolic encodes that relate the Virgin Mary to the North Star. That's why sometimes she's called Stella Maris, Star of the Sea. And so to me, this expression of the phallic stem, and then at the very end of it, the tip of it, the head of it, having this feminine expression, to me, this like very clear feminine expression, although I guess you could make the argument that it's potentially both. But to me, flowers are just so, lovely and feminine that way. But to have this feminine expression at the end of a stem, just like the northern sky having a really potent feminine expression around Polaris, including Polaris, to me, symbolically, is just another beautiful detail that I wanted to highlight. So here we have just another flower, and just look how amazing this is. My appreciation for the design of flowers and plants over the last 2 or 3 years has really just been taken to the next level, because I'm like in awe when I see this kind of stuff now. It's very, very striking to me. Right. And so it looks like a star. A lot of flowers look like stars. And so I think this is another thing that I'm trying to kind of get across, is that there's star symbolism associated with flowers. And here we have some poppies. She's smiling. So, what did you want to say about poppies?
Oh, well, I mean, I love poppies, and had the experience of actually growing them on like a little bit more of a larger scale this year. And I just find them to be really demonstrative of what we're talking about because of the shape of the stem, And then you have the bulb up top, which is harnessing all the beautiful sap that can be turned into very valuable medicine when it's used correctly and not, taken advantage of. And then on the top of the poppy, which we can illustrate in a slide that's coming up, there is an actual star pattern that is right in there. And the poppy itself has so much power to it, and I'm just super excited that we're using this as an example because it's one of my favorite plants.
Yeah. And look at that color palette.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, I just think whenever I see this, the flower itself and then the poppies too, it's beautiful stuff. Um, and so this is one of the slides that Michelle really wanted to have in here. And I think you want to just talk about how feminine it looks, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looks like a woman in a beautiful, like flamenco dancing gown who is just greeting you with her beauty. She's welcoming you in. And poppies, I could go on for a while with poppies, but one of the doctrine of signatures with this plant is it produces a white sap. And the white sap is where a lot of the pain relieving medicine comes from, the calming down properties of it. And one of the things that Matthew Wood talks about is that plants that harness a white sap like poppy or something like wild lettuce actually have consciousness diminishing properties. And I find that very just interesting, and it's actually very accurate. And just a little short story about poppies, because I was growing them and experimenting with them. I was working with a few poppies and I was trying to extract the sap, and I wasn't wearing gloves. And so had I now I will probably wear gloves moving forward, but I had to go and run out to the store, and I got to the store and I found myself in the pickle aisle, and I was like staring at all the pickles, and I was just like staring and like zoning out and zoning out, and I was like, what is going on? And I was like, oh my god, well, it's because I was like working with poppy before I came here, and I could just totally feel its effects. And it's just like one of those very good reminders of how powerful plants are and how powerful their medicine is and how they need to be respected. And so that's just one of the things that I wanted to really talk about with poppy, is that when it's respected and it's used properly, it is like it has such a valuable medicine. And I think that that might be one of the reasons why it demonstrates what we're trying to talk about so well, is because it is like one of the more like potent, powerful, helpful medicines when you would be in need of something like this, because there are times when something like poppy medicine could be very valuable, and an alternative to using something more harsh that could be like some kind of painkiller, or something to bring you down so much that you will just sleep.
I love the pickle story. That's awesome.
Oh my god.
I'm just gonna check the chat real quick, just to see what's going on, if people are experiencing any delays or if we're glitching out or whatever. So give us a thumbs up if things are cool. Right. Cool. Wizard of Oz. Yep, exactly. Nice. Okay, cool. People are just talking. That is awesome. I'm happy to hear that people are just talking about the information. All good. Nice. Okay, cool. Thank you, Debbie. So let's get back to sharing my screen here. And we will proceed. Well, as Michelle was saying, it's really amazing when you look at the top of the poppy bulb. Depending on the stage, you will see a star, and you were telling me that this star could be a number of points, right?
Yes.
And so this happens to be an 8-pointed star, but it just fits in line symbolically with everything that I've wanted to talk about, with the flower being a star, with there being a literal star on top of this bulb, which is at the very top of the stem, right? This is just kind of reminding me that when I was doing Virgo research, Virgo is like the queen of heaven, but she has a terrestrial relationship. She has a relationship with Earth as well. And so she has a relationship with the physical soil and the ground beneath our feet. And so Virgo is an Earth sign. And this means that when we're talking about, say, Virgo, the Virgin, in my opinion, when I think about her nature and what she represents, there's an as above, so below correspondence. She is the queen of heaven, but she's also the queen of earth. And so in a way, we're kind of like living between this goddess, this great goddess of the skies and of the ground we walk on. And so I'm just reminded of that as we're going through this presentation, because when we're looking at the tree and when we're looking at some of these plants, the most phallic part of it is that central stem, which exists, between the earth and between the heavens. And so it almost just makes me think, I wonder now if the roots are also like a feminine expression in a lot of ways. And then the stem is the masculine phallic expression. And then the top, the bulb or the flower or the star or whatever that might exist at the top of the plant, if that's also a feminine expression. That would make a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, I would say. But just something that I would throw out there. And so to me, this star, if it's, when we're talking about star symbolism, no matter how many points it has, in my opinion, there is a star of stars. And to me, that is Polaris. That is the central star that everything revolves around. So just from how I look at things, this is an expression of the pole star, right? And so here is just like a generic image of a star that's supposed to represent the pole star. And contrary to many people's beliefs, there's a misconception that Polaris is the brightest star in the night sky. It absolutely is not. I remember hearing that as a child, and so I don't know how many years ago I looked into it, and all you have to do is just go outside too and look at Polaris compared to other stars, and it is not the brightest star out there. Symbolically, it might be the brightest star out there, but not literally. And so, for those of you who don't know, Polaris is right here in the middle. It's at the tip of the handle. That is Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, or the Little Dipper, and then down below you see highlighted the Ursa Major constellation, which is the Great Bear, and literally the constellations of the night sky revolve around this central star, which I think is pretty amazing. And when you come from things from a more geocentric perspective, this means a lot more than it used to mean when you're looking at everything through a heliocentric lens. That is like the whole flip that I think happened, is that geocentrism acknowledged this pole, acknowledged Polaris. Heliocentrism, when it came into the mix, you're acknowledging the sun. And a lot of the symbols that were attributed to Polaris or the axis mundi were then now attributed to the sun. And I think that there was that switch that happened. So if you've never seen it, the night sky revolves around Polaris. This is a time-lapse photo. And so what this means is that, the world tree, if it's symbolic of the axis mundi at the north, then when you see the star on top of a Christmas tree, this is symbolic of the North Star. And where does Santa come from? He comes from the North Pole. Santa, I've been calling, he's like a pop culture god. He's like a pop culture deity, if you want to say. A lot of groups' supreme deities come from the north, even if they don't even acknowledge it like outright. The subliminal sort of information or the history that it's built upon has to do with deities coming from the north. This is just kind of how it is. In my opinion, it seems to be the case. And so Christmas, in many ways, is like a northern holiday, which I think is just absolutely fascinating. And then I didn't even realize this really, but if you're looking at this dome in the background, that's very much symbolic of the firmament. And then notice that there's a statue up top. This is all axis mundi symbolism, in my opinion. But the axis mundi, this world pillar or column, has had many expressions over the years, including the tower, the obelisk, whether it's a modern obelisk or an Egyptian obelisk. This is the axis mundi. This is world pillar symbolism. This is the monolith from 2001. I think it's very much in line with the same theme.
And when I see this, I can't help but talk about how the monolith to me, and I know you've brought this up, but like the monolith kind of being our phones now, and that polar symbolism kind of still ringing true, and how central are people's phones to their lives now, and it for good reason. Obviously they're tools and we gain things from them, we can use them to do amazing things, but they can also be used for not so productive avoidance things as well. And so I just always think of that now when I see 2001 monolith.
Yeah, no, that's totally appropriate for sure. You know, I'm going to be getting into it in a few slides, right? But the axis mundi symbolism, this monolith symbolism, this phallic symbolism, it's symbolic of the sacred center, the same way the axle or the hub of a wheel is the middle of the churning of everything, right? And so we used to have like cultural sacred centers, and our home used to have a sacred center to it as well. Oftentimes it was the hearth. There's a reason why the primitive has the fire right in the middle, and then the smoke goes out the hole at the top of the teepee or whatever. This was centralized for a very, very good reason. And I think that technology has kind of become the new sacred center for a lot of people. You don't look in the fire anymore. You're looking at a screen of sorts. And it's my understanding too, just to riff off of what you're saying, is that the monolith, I guess Kubrick wanted to have like flashing images and like video on the monolith, but they couldn't pull it off. So they just made it pure black.
Interesting.
And the monolith changes everything. So now these apes, they evolved because of this sacred center. This whole concept is something that is lost now. But I want to talk about it and learn more about it. So the standing stone, is symbolic of the axis mundi. It's the world pillar as well. And so you'll see these all over the place, and it can represent a number of things. But one of the things it represents is the center of something, the same way the world tree represents the center and corresponds with centers. And so this very well could have been the cultural center for a community, and they would congregate here. That is my understanding. Also, I'm realizing too that there are standing stones and towers that have been used with for funerary purposes. And so I think Dylan was talking about it recently on his Instagram. People being buried underneath towers and standing stones like this. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, because what is the standing stone? It's the same symbolism that I've been talking about the whole presentation. It's a bridge. So it's a bridge to the other side. So it's a means to go from this domain, this plane, to the heavens. Yeah.
Well, and the burial thing reminds me of what Ben Balderson has talked about with the family tree. The actual like families of old had trees where they buried all of the family members underneath the tree. Is that right? Correct?
Yeah, they would put their ashes there, I think.
Put the ashes. There you go. That makes more sense. But that to me, I mean, that says a lot, because then you're putting the ashes of your family, which are then going to be infused in the roots, which is then just going to be infused into the whole tree. And that's just such a beautiful symbolic gesture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And these family trees meant the world to these people. And so if your family tree was chopped down, or if it was destroyed or lost, my understanding is that was the beginning of the end for your people. And so I think now would be a good time actually to shout out this book. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's called At the Center of the World. As I'm showing the slides, I can't see my camera or where you guys are at. But it's called At the Center of the World by John Michel. And the tagline is Polar Symbolism Discovered in Celtic, Norse, and Other Ritualized Landscapes. You obviously probably saw that there's Yggdrasil right there on the cover. This book took me a little while to read. I gave it a break for a number of months, and then I returned to it. I just wrapped it up within the last 2 weeks. and it is a banger. There is so much awesome information in there. And he talks about these standing stones. And so sometimes these stones were called division stones because they existed at the middle of a community, and it divided the community into the different sections because it was the center point. So it would divide the community into quadrants, and so they were called division stones because it was the central point where people would come and meet. And so having a central location for your people, whether you lived on an island or you had a region or whatever, you wanted to know what the central location was so that people from all over the land can come and congregate and create new laws, um, and basically have celebrations, do rituals, things like that. And so this central sort of like totem concept is a really big deal, and it's kind of blowing my mind right now. So we have the idea of like a city center. A lot of city centers, a lot of cities, especially older cities, they will literally have like a foundation stone, or they'll have, like when we went to Dublin. In Dublin, there's this big old spire needle looking thing. That was the center of town. And so this is a tradition that goes way, 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 way back, is that you have something in the middle of your space. And so sometimes it was a mound. It's been many different things. So it's been mounds or mountains, it's been stones, it's been trees, there's been caves. There's a number of different variations on the theme, but this sacred center sort of location is like the preeminent thing that kind of holds them all together. So even Jerusalem, this is the Dome of the Rock. So this is the Temple Mount. And so underneath this dome, look at the axis mundi geocentric firmament symbolism with the dome, right? Underneath this dome is the foundation stone. And within that foundation stone, there is a hole. And so this stone and this location, the Temple Mount, is like the most hotly contested, piece of real estate on the planet. And so it's because that it's symbolic of a cultural center, and so people have been fighting over it for a very, very long time. And so here in this facility, in this building, is a stone. And so it is the same thing as what I was showing with the standing stone or a mound or whatever. It's taken on different shapes over the years, and this is their version. And people obviously flock from all over the world to see it. I've brought this up before too, but in Saudi Arabia, you have Mecca and you have the Kaaba cube. The whole thing is that you want to walk around the cube. My understanding is it's actually 7 times. And so people who follow my work will know how significant that is. Very much symbolic of Ursa Major and Minor, and a lot of ascension material that make use out of the number 7. So this would be their cultural sacred center here. And this sacred center concept, it reminds me a lot of Plato's version of Atlantis. And so you have a concentric ringed reality, and the Holy of Holies, the bullseye, what resides at the very center, is the most important piece of this whole entire layout, right? This is actually how things were just done back in the day. I'm not saying with the moats, but I'm saying with like a ring land system of having this central point, not unlike a flower, not unlike a lot of plants that you're going to see out there, this central point, which everything then emanates from or grows from.
Yeah. Well, and to talk about like the ringland theory, I just think that the this whole concept and theory of the pole being the sacred center and everything else, it kind of gives more credit to even something like the egg-based theory and the ringlands, which in my opinion, I do feel like that our system may be more like a ringland system. And when they say that aliens invade from outer space or whatever, it's actually whatever the entity would be, they're actually coming from like an outer ringland or something like that. And this whole thing just totally brings more validation to that.
Yeah, we can get really far out if we want to with everything, because in my opinion, what we live on, our whole plane is a ringland system. We just live in one of the rings. And I would say that we don't live in the innermost ring and we don't live in the outermost ring, but we live somewhere in the middle. In my opinion, that's what Earth is. And so I think that in the outer rings, you're more than likely dealing with older entities, more than likely Saturnian type of entities, which Saturn is like the end of the line under the traditional 7 planetary system. And then when you're going inward, you're probably dealing, if there are entities, with younger entities that are more aligned with Mercury. And so the sacred center has a correspondence with the Garden of Eden. And with there's a youthfulness, there's like a fountain of youth sort of correspondence with the center of this domain and of the center of anything, really. That the center is younger at heart, and the exterior tends to be this older sort of concept. And so we live in a ring land system. I think that's what the Atlantean, Plato's version of Atlantis, is basically alluding to. I think that's what Lord of the Rings is about. Yes, there's an actual like physical ring, but there's also the rings, as in the ring lands, which is basically what this book gets into at the center of the world. And so I think communities used to be ring land based. So your community would have the center as well. But then there may have been a larger sacred center with your whole country, right? But then within your own property, you would more than likely have your own sacred center as well, maybe a tree or your hearth or whatever. And so I think everything seems to have been designed that way back in the day. And I think all of that is kind of thrown off now. But it makes a lot of sense that it's all designed for a very good reason. And it reminds me a lot. Well, actually, before we get there, when we were doing research for this project, I came across this illustration that is showing what ancient Ireland may have been like. And to me, this is just very clearly a cultural sacred center, right here. And then notice that the actual hut itself is circular in nature. And then notice that in the background, though, it's a gigantic ring, so they're within a large ring. And then this little base here is another ring within that ring. And I assume that the ring just kind of extends outward. And so this seems to be how people used to design things back in the day before we made everything into squares and whatnot. But it reminds me of like growth rings of a tree. Obviously, we all know that the oldest parts of a tree are further out, the youngest parts are inward. And so this seems to be like the pattern or design of so many things. And so this sacred center, symbolic of the axis mundi and everything that I've been going on about. It also very much reminds me of ripples. So if you just take a pebble and you throw it in a body of water, well, everybody knows what happens. You create ripples. And so that is what we're dealing with in the natural world. Very much symbolic of the torus field and everything the torus field represents. There's a center, everything is expressed from that center, but comes back around to it. Just like a lot of the world tree sort of symbols out there. It almost looks like the branches are meeting the roots. If you just look at an apple, you'll see the toroidal nature of an apple, and then you'll see that little axis mundi stem popping up from the top of it, from where it's pinched up top, right? And then if you just cut the apple in half, you see everything that I'm talking about.
Well, and also not to forget that when you cut it the horizontal way, that there's a star in the center.
Yeah, absolutely. The star Venus, for sure. So, when we're talking about Northern symbolism, one of the things that I think is really fascinating is this whole entire idea that there are 4 rivers emanating from the north. And this could very well be literal, it could just be symbolic, but there is this idea with the sacred center that corresponds with the number 4. Most of the time, it's 4 rivers. There's also this idea of 4 winds. Sometimes they're at the 4 corners of Earth blowing inward. I've seen it where they're in the center blowing outward. But this idea of a cross, basically, that is created at any central point is something that I feel like is worth acknowledging. So you can acknowledge it as the 4 cardinal directions, as an example. So no matter where I'm at on Earth, there, at least from my perspective, as just a point, a blip, in space, there's a north, south, and east and west from where I am located, right? And so this concept of 4 is something that you'll see popped up all over the place. It reminds me of the circling, the square sort of idea as well. A lot of times you'll see the cross kind of paired with something more feminine. And I'll show you some slides here that kind of show that. But before we get there, this is a poppy flower. And I love the fact that there's a cross right there in the middle of the flower. I think it's so striking. And I love how wild the petals are, right? And so when I saw this photo, which Michelle took, when I saw this photo, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We have to talk about the cross and the sacred center. But before we move on to that, did you want to say anything about this? Are you good?
I mean, I kind of already went into the poppy, but yeah, I mean, it's just so striking and beautiful. And it's like this feels like a really loaded flower symbolically. There is so much going on. And I'd like to showcase the leaves a little bit better too, just because going back to like the companionship with the wild lettuce, which if anybody is familiar with that, which I'm sure there's people in the chat who are, it sometimes is even referred to as opium lettuce because it has a lot of the same pain relieving properties as opium poppies do. Not as strong as the poppy, but it's kind of in the very much same realm and produces that same sap. And I always look at the way the petals are, it reminds me of somebody who might be frazzled, who might be twisted up, who might be just kind of feeling erratic, maybe. And the poppy medicine, as we all know from even popular culture, is just super calming and can be used for really, really severe cases of pain. And so when I see this, that's what I think of. And I think of the same thing with the leaves. And to bring up Matthew Wood again, he talks about wild lettuce and the fact that it is a street person's plant. Because when you see a plant that looks like wild lettuce or even like poppy, where it looks like frazzled and kind of just like disheveled or it's a little bit like crinkled up, he has used the wild lettuce for actually a person who was living on the streets that came to him in his clinical practice, and he was able to help him um, get through his stuff using wild lettuce. And so I just always love that connection and that thought of just like looking at something like poppy and seeing like what it might be good for. Again, going back to the Doctrine of Signatures thing, but that cross right there too kind of just like brings you back to thinking like this is the center. This is like a center medicine. This is a medicine that is going to be super potent and powerful. And I think like that's kind of where my mind goes when I think like looking at this. I'm like, wow, that's a loaded symbol. It's a loaded flower, baby. That's for sure.
Yeah, it looks psychedelic to me. And just before we get into that, I just want to share this real quick. So, because we're getting into the cross symbolism and everything else, right? I picked up this book on the cheap. It's called Symbolism of the Celtic Cross by Derek Bryce. And I was very stoked to see, this is actually why I bought it. I was very stoked to see that the first thing he mentions in the book is that he mentions the symbolism of the pillar stones that we've kind of been getting into. Right? So you see these pillar stones. That's how he starts the whole entire book, is by talking about the pillar stones, so that he can lay a foundation to talk about the Celtic cross. And here he says that the pillar stones are symbolic of the world axis. So what do you know? So what I'm coming to realize is that essentially uh the cross, as we know it, started off as this axis mundi, this world axis, this pillar stone, and Christianity and heliocentrism just added a crossbar to it. Therefore, you get the cross, basically. And so he says here that they symbolize the axis mundi or world axis, the pole or link between heaven and earth, what I've been talking about. The oldest symbol of the world axis is the sacred tree, best known as the tree of life, right? So this is all very much related. The tree of life, the world tree, the cross, the pillar, all of the things, right? So I just wanted to kind of explain that real quick, that this is definitely the deal and the thing. So let's get back to the presentation, sharing the screen once again. So here you have this cross, right? And it reminded me of the rosy cross. And so here you can see a cross with a rose right inside of it. And then this is known as the Hebrew rose. I think there's a few different names for it, but these are all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So if if people have been looking into occultism and things like that, they should probably recognize this cross. And then if you just want to see a more zoomed out perspective, you see that there's a larger cross with this rows of Hebrew letters, and each layer of Hebrew letters means something different. So they're different categories of letters. And then within that rose, you see a cross. And then within that cross, you see the rose. So the rose or the flower and feminine symbolism very much connects to the cross in a lot of ways, because what we're really talking about is the sacred center. So when we're talking about the northern sky or the axis mundi, we're talking about poles, but where there are poles, there are holes. So I've said this before, it's all about poles and holes symbolically. And so you can imagine that at this cross where the lines or the cross intersects, that is the axis point. These are crossroads, and this is kind of like that central point is just symbolic of everything that I'm talking about. Poles and holes, the masculine and the feminine. So this is the quartered cross, or the quartered circle, excuse me. And it's really interesting to me that when you talk to most people about this symbol, they're going to say it's a solar based symbol. But according to my research, this is actually an earth based symbol. So there are certain symbolic traditions that associate a circular design with the 5 elements, the 4 base elements, and then the 5th element, spirit or ether. And this is actually the symbol for earth itself, which to me makes a lot of sense because we're talking about the 4 corners of earth, all of the things I was just talking about. So my understanding is basically that the quartered circle used to be an earth-based geocentric symbol, and with heliocentrism / Christianity, it became a solar symbol. And obviously, Christ, the Son, is very much associated with the cross. But I would argue that before it was a solar symbol, before it was a sun symbol, it was actually a symbol of the earth. It was a geocentric symbol, basically. It was symbolic of the sacred center. And really funny too, this is the symbol for the sun. So this is the circumpunct. People used to call it the Godhead. It's gone by a bunch of different names. I think that the exact same thing happened with this symbol as well, is that we know it today as being a solar based symbol, but I believe it used to be a polar based symbol. It was more of a geocentric symbol. It was the sacred center, and then it was the churning of everything around it, essentially. It's just like a wheel, or it's just like the night sky with Polaris or the axis mundi right in the middle. So I think that's very fascinating that there were geocentric, earth-based symbols that were then changed to be solar-based symbols. That seems to me like that's what happened. I came across this image while coming up with the presentation slides and everything, and this is a Rosicrucian image, apparently. It says that this is the Holy Grail and the Rosy Cross. And I have never seen this before. I can't tell from what year it came from. I actually couldn't even cross-reference it and find it anywhere online. So I do not know what book this was published in or what the deal is. But when I saw it, I was like really stoked because it encodes a lot of interesting things that I've been looking into lately. So notice the 7 stars up top, 7 stars of Ursa Major, the cross with the rose. That's the sacred center. That's the Axis Mundi. It's my opinion that the Holy Grail, there may be actual physical Holy Grail relics out there, but I'm under the impression that it's a metaphor for the sacred center, for the center of this domain or plane that we live on. And then you've got you've got a wafer, what looks like a wafer within the Grail. And blood symbolism and sacrifice symbolism is very much in line with Grail symbolism as well. And so there's a lot of stuff going on here that relates to the Chariot card as well, especially the Crowley version of the Chariot card. So he's actually holding a Holy Grail made of amethyst over his belly. And so I think he's tapping into the Holy Grail mysteries with that card in part. But I think it all comes back to this sacred center sort of concept. What I wanted to point out, and what you noticed too, is that there is the sun over here, and then there is the moon over here. So if we're talking about sacred center axis mundi Polaris symbolism, I think that it's like going on in spades up here. Personally, that's what it looks like to me. What that's really telling you is that Polaris is kind of operating on another level outside of the solar lunar system. And I think that's partly the deal of what's actually going on here. Ben Balderson has done work on this. Elsie King has done work on this too. But acknowledging just the sun and the moon without acknowledging Polaris as, at the very least, being part of that system, I think you'll be missing something. So when I came across this, I felt like it tied together a lot of things that I wanted to get into, including where we started off with this flower right here with the rosy cross, kind of just embedded in nature for you just to see, which is really wild. So with that said, that really concludes the bulk of the presentation. The main reason why I wanted to talk about this was just to give some awareness of this central pillar and how it relates to the world tree and how it's expressed everywhere, in my opinion. All you have to do is just go outside and start looking around, and you will find examples of that being the case. Did you have anything else to say as far as the presentation is concerned? Because I think after this, it's just promo stuff.
Yeah, I mean, great job is
Oh, thanks.
firstly. And I'm really excited that you were actually finally able to just express some of this stuff outward and share it with people, because one of the main things that always comes to my mind with all this is like when you think about that last image, I think it really encapsulates what you're trying to get across, how this is like the sun and the moon are part of the system, but Polaris, the pole star, is probably our main focus. And then it always just makes me think about, if they invert so many other things, why have they not inverted this for us? You know what I mean? And so that's why when this stuff started coming up and you're just making all these connections and putting it together, it's just like, wow, this could be maybe one of the grander inversions that we've been presented with to kind of throw us all off. And I think that this is just one of those things where it kind of starts to bring everything back home a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, you said it, man. I mean, I just think you did a great job showing all this and demonstrating it.
Awesome. Thank you. So maybe we can stop sharing for a second, check the chat and whatever, see what's going on. But yeah, I mean, basically, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about polar symbolism and the North Star and everything else, and geocentrism too, is that it's a return to self. It's a return to your own inner awareness, your own sovereignty, your own divinity, your own psychology. I really feel like heliocentrism as a model, it's an agenda, and it creates a solar centric mind And I think that there are merits to be understood studying all of that symbolism, but it just needs to be known that there was another system before that, basically, and it was a more geocentric system. And so the symbolic language of how you talk about that flips and it changes. And so if you're talking to a heliocentrist and they're a symbologist or they're a historian or they're a psychologist or whatever, all their whole philosophy is going to be dictated based around the sun because they live in a heliocentric landscape. So they put the sun as the center of everything. So this is what astrology is all about. So just to be kind of completely honest and open, I'm very conflicted with astrology right now because it is a solar based system. It's the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun. And so to me, it's just like, how did I grow up? And I was aware of the signs of astrology to a certain degree. I knew I was a Cancer, all of these different things. You see the horoscopes in the newspaper, and they're showing you all of the signs of astrology. They're showing you the zodiac and all of that. Obviously, astrology goes through waves. And so it comes and it goes and it becomes popular and less popular and things like that. I would say it's definitely kind of like on the rise right now, but this is a sun-based system, so if I'm not a heliocentrist anymore, if I'm not thinking like the sun is at the center of everything, how much sense does it make for me to continue studying the signs of astrology that are based on the ecliptic? And now that I have a realization that there was another system pre-astrology, pre the zodiac, that gets me really excited because I want to know more about that. And so I was talking to a few people online, and basically, the number 12 is a solar number, so the 12 months of the year, the 12 signs of the zodiac, this is solar heliocentric symbolism. This number 12 as kind of like this base 12 sort of thing. We all grow up and there's clocks on the wall and it has numbers 1 through 12. This is all coming from a solar based mindset, basically. So I'm just starting to really become skeptical of astrology, mostly because of the solar centered sort of aspect with it. And so I'm just going to continue digging and doing these presentations and letting you guys know like what I'm thinking about it or whatever. But I figured now would be a good time just to kind of get some of this stuff off my chest and see what you guys think. Let's see what's going on with the chat real quick. So I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, but you're talking really great stuff. And I mean, yeah, it makes me think about sidereal astrology a little bit more, though, because that's the 13 sign based astrology. So something to think about. And the mythology that you've found through astrology, I feel like still definitely holds the water that you've, connected. But yeah, I mean, when you have a paradigm shift, pretty much everything gets reevaluated. But if anybody has questions for Mario, why don't you go ahead and throw them up in the chat because we have a little bit of time left. We'll probably end at the 2-hour mark. So if anybody has anything that you want to pick his brain or anything, just throw it up. And yeah, we're so stoked. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you. Yes, he is crushing. Thank you, James. And love you too. I just really grateful for all the people who stuck around through the technical difficulties, and I think we flowed with it pretty well considering everything. So yeah, just be looking for more of this stuff for sure coming out.
Yeah, exactly, Mari. It's really interesting. What I'm trying to figure out, if anybody knows what's going on with this, it's like pre um pre heliocentrism, pre the zodiac, was it just solely a pole star based system, or did it also include the moon? So I'm just wondering, it's like, did it go solar, lunar, polar, or was it like solar and then polar slash lunar or something like that, northern sky stuff? And so that's kind of one of the things I'm trying to figure out. I'm like not I'm not going to commit to any dates or any eras on when I think this flip actually happened. I think history is really messy. I'm sure many people here know and understand that side of things pretty well. But I will say that it appears to me like there was that flip. A flip absolutely occurred. And so a lot of stuff that is solar in nature was once polar in nature. Cool. Thank you guys for the comments.
Yeah, and I like Lucas said that where was it? The Sun and the Moon guide. Or sorry, the
It'll show up right there.
the world axis guides the sun and the moon. Perfect. I love that. Thank you, Lucas. That's what it feels like to me anyway, especially seeing that illustration. When he found that, I was like, whoa, I feel like if you had to show just one thing to kind of like illustrate this to somebody, it just kind of puts it into perspective that the sun and the moon are down here along the sides. They're important, no doubt, but yeah, kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you guys for just sharing what you know and giving me your feedback. Much appreciated. More to come in that regard. Is there anything else, Bub, that you wanted to get to?
I just want you to tell people where they can find you and all of that kind of good stuff, what you're working on, what you're excited about. And yeah, just kind of let people know.
Yeah, totally. So you guys can find me at symbolicstudies.com. I'm all over the place, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, things like that. I have been slow to post as of late, so I haven't really been putting out too many videos, but I'm learning a lot right now. So it's a blessing because I'm taking the time to read through some of the material that I've been wanting to read through. I have literally like a stack of books about Northern symbolism that I've shown a few of you guys here actually that I've been wanting to get to for a while. And so I'm just taking the time to read through some of that, and my mind is being blown for sure. And so the next project I'm going to release is going to be a juicy one. I'm really excited for it. I think I want to lean into the longer form content side of things. And I'm just excited to put out more information about this, and you can see where I'm leaning towards. It's pretty obvious. I think in a lot of ways I was studying astrology, and I think I was like kind of doing it out of obligation in a weird way, and doing it I think for a lot of wrong reasons. But I think that it's time for me just to kind of start exposing and talking about this polar symbolism stuff more, and just be open and honest about it, instead of beating around the bush. Because beforehand I would put out videos and stuff, and like I'm like lightly dancing around some of this symbolism, but it's time for me just to be more direct with it. So that's the thing. And yeah, that's it. You guys can find me at Symbolic Studies. We do have a couple more slides left to share with you all and to stream. There we go. So now it's your time to shine.
Well, thank you. And yes, I'm very proud of you for finally taking the steps to start just talking about this more openly, because it is where your juju lies, and I can feel it, and I know you feel it, and I think others around you feel it too. So just a little quick thing with what I've got going on, my offerings right now. My full moon offering newsletter is coming out tomorrow on the full moon. So if you haven't subscribed to that, you can do that on my website, michelleshealinghome.com. And I already have the remedy. The offering that I have this month is the first one listed here. It's my new product. It's my CBD whip, which is a body butter. I'm very excited about it. It's really lovely. It's really great for most moisturizing, lovely for the winter when your skin is drying out and things like that. It has the CBD in it, so it's really great for using it as a muscle rub, but I like it as a daily moisturizer. And that's really beautiful. So that's coming out tomorrow. And I've got elderberry reishi mushroom syrup. I've got a reishi double extract, CBD, and St. John's wort massage and body oil. My antifungal and wound healing salve, black pulling salve. My deodorants are also available. My Rest Easy tincture and anointing oil set. I really love this one right here because it is a tincture of motherwort, hops, and blue vervain. And then the anointing oil is made with fresh lavender that we grew in our garden. And the scent of the lavender really came through super strongly in the anointing oil. And I did not use any essential oils in that. So it's very nice, pure, smells like lavender flowers straight up. And then I also have some fresh herb tinctures that are available. I have mugwort, motherwort, St. John's wort, blue vervain, and lemon balm. So if you're interested in any of these products, you can email me, Michelle's Healing Home at Gmail. You can also text me 503-568-1569. I also am available for consultations. If you are wanting to learn how to make your own remedies, maybe you're wanting to learn how to communicate with plants a little better, do herbal meditation, you're just wanting to maybe like learn some new skills with making things. That's my jam. That's where I'm most comfortable at. So, if you're maybe trying to start your own herbal business, maybe you want some tips on how to do some of those things, I can talk with you about that. And more information about my consultations is also on my website. And that, I think, will do it for now, huh? Yeah. And thank you again for tuning in on a Tuesday. This is the third episode, and I am just really excited how this is all going. I am so grateful for the community that is around, supporting, just being here. You guys inspire me. I've said that before. And next week, I have Elise from Family Fungi who's going to be on, and we're going to be talking about her path as a doula and a birth keeper, and just working with the realm of birth and her experience of that. And she has a very powerful message, and I'm just really excited to talk to her. She had a really great interview with Chance on Interverse. I think it was a few months back, maybe in October. And when I heard her speak about what she does, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to talk to this woman more, because she just stands her ground. She's very honest with her experience with it. I love her perspective on it. And we're going to get into just even some more feminine symbols, what it means, what are we working with here, and just it's kind of like ties back to what we're talking about today with with the world tree, the polar axis, all of it. So very excited to talk to Elise. And next week's show is going to start at 3 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. So yeah, kind of tune in and come hang out with us, and we'll see you guys very soon. Take care and have a really great evening. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it.